In a couple of recent speeches, he said he thinks electricians capture electricity from the sky.
The electrician who captures lightning from the sky runs it through a copper wire.
In a fun reminder that Canadian politics can be entertaining, Housing Minister and Liberal MP Sean Fraser went after Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre during question period. And I'm going to show you this clip, and then I'm going to break down, because I learned some things here that I was not aware of. But this is very funny, very entertaining. Check this out.
Why won't they realize that they're the problem and not the solution?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition has been masquerading across the country as a working-class hero, but it's fascinating when you actually listen to what he thinks people do for a living. In a couple of recent speeches, he said he thinks electricians capture electricity from the sky and that welders weld with their bare hands. What's he going to tell me next? The fishermen in my community dive beneath the ocean and catch them with their bare teeth? Mr. Speaker, I can forgive the opposition leader for being a career politician who's been on the public dime for a couple of decades, but if he wants to represent the interests of the working class, he should talk to a person who has a real job.
All right, so I'm going to break a bit of this down because I learned some things here that I was not aware of. Now, I want to be clear up front. I am not a Liberal voter. I tend to vote either NDP or Green. I was a Green Party candidate at one point in my life, but I don't really consider myself to be any one party. I'm for working class policies. So I typically don't vote Liberal. That said, I have to acknowledge the amazing job here that Sean Fraser did in question period. And before I even get to some of the stuff I want to break down, I got to point out, Pierre Poilievre, after he gave his little speech there, he left. You could see him walking out. So you may have missed that. I watched it a few times, and then I noticed it. Here he is getting his stuff, and then here he is over here leaving. And he just leaves. He doesn't sit for the response, just runs out. So that tells you something. I'm going to get to more, though. First, let's just acknowledge the makeover here. I did a video on this makeover, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe like sometime last year. Just, come on. This is your typical politician maneuver. Oh, now you're leader? Well, got to make you look like some more attractive. This is after, by the way, look, I have no issue with this, whatever. You want to improve yourself, you want to work out, good on you. What I have an issue with is that they spent years attacking Trudeau for how he looks. And then they go and do this makeover for Pierre Poilievre, trying to also make him look like a, clean-cut, more attractive individual. It's so insane. It's so stupid. But let me start by breaking some of this down, because so the comments about the welder working with his hands, this, I don't really care that Poilievre said this, because I don't really think he meant that welders just weld with their hands. I'm sure he knows they use tools. I'm sure he knows that there is welding machinery that they use. He has to know that, at least. So this is a comment he made so we get the reference.
That I believe that the welder who can fuse together metals with his bare hands has more brain power in how to direct his dollar than the guy who doesn't read his briefing notes, right?
Okay, so it just the typical politician oozing off of Pierre Poilievre while he's trying to talk to working class voters. Hilarious. But look, this comment, whatever. I don't think he meant literally they just used their bare hands. But this one's a little more amazing. So the lightning from the sky is something he has apparently said. So this is from Luc Lebrun. 4 separate occasions. And he says this as if this is how they actually capture electricity. This one is amazing.
The electrician who captures lightning from the sky runs it through a copper wire to illuminate this room and light up the world is not ordinary. He is extraordinary. The electrician that captures the electricity from the sky and runs it through a copper wire to light up this room, he is extraordinary.
The electrician who captures lightning, runs it through a copper wire to light up your home, tames the most fierce force in nature to make us all comfortable and happy and illuminate this room. He is not ordinary, he is extraordinary.
extraordinary.
The electrician who's able to capture lightning and bring it through copper wire to bring us lighting. He is not ordinary. He is extraordinary.
Oh my God. Pierre Poilievre is a career politician. He's only ever worked as a politician his entire working life. I think he first joined Parliament when he was, I know he was in his early 20s, but I forget what age exactly. But this is the only career he's ever known. And, you know, typically I think that career politician line is whatever. I think it depends on the person. I don't mind if you're a career politician. If you spend your life dedicating yourself to helping others, then why do I care if you're a career politician, if you're actually trying to help people? But if you're someone like Pierre Poilievre, who is so disconnected, and is somebody who uses the criticism that others are career politicians, yet you yourself are a career politician, that's when it becomes a problem. And when you're this disconnected, I guess he must, based on all of these clips, it appears this is how he thinks electricity is generated, by capturing lightning out of the sky. I'm amazed. I didn't know he was on this. I've been paying attention here and there to Pierre Poilievre, but I find him so annoying that I find it hard to follow everything he's doing. But this is incredible to me. Now, this isn't even the worst part of Pierre Poilievre. The worst part is that he pretends to be anti-elite. So The Breach has a great piece here. Pierre Poilievre's anti-elite Tories stack top council with corporate lobbyists. Nearly half of the Conservatives' new governing body are lobbyists for oil, pharma, real estate, and anti-union companies. So while he is pretending to fight for the working class and really cares about housing as one example, because that's a huge issue right now, especially for young people. The cost of housing in Canada is insane. Yet you stack your top council with real estate lobbyists, anti-union lobbyists. How can anybody possibly believe that Pierre Poilievre is going to do anything about housing, about wages? It's so, look, I can go deeper into this. I link to all my sources below the video, always, but let me just, reference a bit of this so you know some of the examples here. So Amber Ruddy is one of the individuals on the council, a lobbyist for oil companies like Tor Malign Oil Corp and Husky, several pharmaceutical giants, including GlaxoSmithKline and Merit, the construction association which pushes governments to pass anti-union policies. She's also been registered to lobby for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the country's loudest opponent of wage increases for workers. Also, there's Heather Feldbush. So this is a former staffer for Alberta's United Conservative Party. She has lobbied for oil companies like Enbridge, real estate manager Avenue Commercial, and aviation and real estate investment firm Westerkirk Capital, which is owned by one of the country's richest billionaires. And there's also 3 other council members who are currently or previously worked for Capitol Hill Group, a major Canadian firm that lobbies for Amazon, big tech, security and financial companies, as well as the Canadian Federation of Apartment Associations, the country's largest private housing industry group that has opposed capping rent increases. And many of the same corporations have made record profits in recent years, hiking up prices, driving up inflation, and making life more unaffordable. And to the credit of some conservative members, they attempted, at least some grassroots members attempted to try and exclude these lobbyists, and they were squashed. So they lost the vote. Conservative members voted down a resolution calling for lobbyists to be barred from serving on the 20-member governing body. So some people there who are against this idea thought this was ridiculous, because how could we as conservatives in this scenario, how could we criticize liberals for being attached to corporations, which, by the way, yes, they also are. I would say to a much lesser degree, but they are. How can we criticize them for doing that while we ourselves are putting these lobbyists on our top council? And those grassroots supporters were correct, yet they're voted down by the majority of conservatives. So this gives you an idea of, this communication, that like the separation between how the party is trying to communicate themselves, because to Pierre Poilievre's credit, he understands the moment. He understands what people are feeling. So he's able to market himself to that, of being anti-elite, of being for the working class. Yet, clearly, the way that the party operates and has always operated is not in support of that. And in a video I did recently, I also discussed how the biggest offender when it comes to real estate investment, corporate real estate investment, is the biggest offender in Parliament is a Conservative MP. So I'll link to that video below as well, so you can go and watch that and get more details about, just Pierre Poilievre's attachment to real estate while pretending to be for, the working class, and that he wants to, build more houses when Pierre Poilievre, let's be clear, has always been an elitist and will continue to be one. Now, I'm going to play a bit of this. Again, Sean Fraser, Liberal MP. I'm going to stop this when he starts to try and advertise what the Liberals are doing, because I'm not going to sit here through a Liberal ad. But at the beginning of this, when he's criticizing Pierre Poilievre, is very well done.
Pierre Poilievre pretends to care about helping you find a home. The truth is, he doesn't. Listen to the way he talks about starter homes for young people in this country.
A tiny little shack.
The woman who lives there defended her house.
He called it a shack. A shack. That was a little embarrassing also, because it's not.
And here's his perspective on affordable housing.
They don't want nationalized government-controlled homes, Mr. Speaker. We don't need a Soviet-style takeover of housing.
It's interesting, because as Pierre reminds us constantly, he actually was the housing minister.
I just got to pause there before I get to this housing minister part. The Soviet style, the idea that the Liberals are even trying to argue for public housing is offensive to me. I wish they would. In my video yesterday, I discussed, where I break down Bill Maher's crap about Canada in his recent episode. I discussed Vienna. Vienna, Austria is 8 out of the last 10 years voted the most livable city. And it's because they have the largest social housing project in the world. It is well funded. It is beloved. It's affordable. That is a major piece of the reason why they are consistently voted as the most livable city. Canada only invests about 4% into social housing. And that's even, forget Vienna. Like the UK even does a lot more. I think they're around 17%. So Canada should be doing a lot more investment into public housing, into social housing, but they're not. Yet Pierre Poilievre is trying to position the Liberal Party as some like the Soviets, where they're owning all the homes. It's so absurd.
Because as Pierre reminds us constantly, he actually was the housing minister.
When I was housing minister, let's talk about when I was housing minister.
The fact is, he wasn't very good at it, and I'm not even sure he cared. He only mentioned the word housing once in the House of Commons, and Canada built fewer homes that year than in any year since we formed government. And that's the total number of homes that were built across the entire economy. But when you actually look at what the government got done when Pierre was housing minister, his record's even worse. They supported exactly 0 new apartments across Canada while he was minister. They withdrew from cooperative housing and supported none. And when it comes to affordable housing, Pierre was responsible for a grand total of 6 affordable units across the entire country. Now, these stats aren't a coincidence. They're a direct consequence of decisions that Pierre and his government made to make massive cuts to home building. And now he's promising to make those cuts again. In fact, Pierre has gone so far as to say that governments should get out of the business of home building altogether. And there's some weird stuff in this plan that just doesn't make sense. He wants to create a super bonus that only applies to a few select cities across Canada and has very little money in it, certainly not enough to make a difference. He's proposing to create an entire bureaucracy just to service a snitch line so people can rat out their neighbors if they disagree with their housing policies. We've put billions of dollars.
All right, now it gets to like the Liberal commercial, which I'm not, I'll link to this below the video if you care to watch it, but I'm not going to play a Liberal commercial on my channel. But that's a good breakdown of what Pierre Poilievre has done. Like this, for him to try and criticize anybody else about housing. Yeah, when he was the housing minister, he did very little, is ridiculous. Now, I'm not going to, this will be a whole separate video, but the new federal budget was released, and it puts a bit more money into housing, into addressing high cost of rent as well. It also puts a a cap on non-sufficient fund fees. So, if you at a bank, if you try to take out too much money, they charge you for that. They're putting a cap on that at $10, which is good to see. I'm seeing that isn't as publicized as much for whatever reason, but that's a good piece. And if you want to see a deeper, I'm sure there are going to be larger breakdowns from Canadian outlets, more working class focused Canadian outlets. But unrigged.ca, I will link to this below the video. They bring in a whole wealth of various Canadian media that is worth listening to. The Breach that I showed you earlier is one of them. The Maple's another one, but a whole bunch of them. I'm sure there's going to be more analysis on the Canadian budget, and I would check Unrigged out to see some of that. So I want people to understand. I'm going to continue doing videos on and on until a future election at some point about this. That Pierre Poilievre is not for the working class. He's incredibly fake. He's a career politician, voted against gay marriage, voted for restrictions on abortion, voted against cannabis legalization, has worked his entire life for massive corporations. This idea that Pierre Poilievre cares at all about working class people is absolutely absurd.